Greetings, dear viewers. Welcome to Diaspora Point. This is Auma Bella, your host. Today we have an amazing guest. We are going to listen to what she has to tell us. This lady has experienced it all. In Kenya, high profile, then she goes to the US for further studies. You know, we Africans like to study. And then she does so well. I don't want to say everything. She got her PhD and then she comes back home, and I better stop. Welcome, Jemima. Karibu sana. Our guest is Jemima Mwakisha, Dr. Jemima Mwakisha. Welcome, Dr. Jemima Mwakisha, to Diaspora Point. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about what you're doing now, what you did before, what you're doing now, and what you did before then. You have a great story to tell. Karibu sana.
Asante sana, Belina. Thank you very much and thanks for the invitation.
Welcome.
It's I have watched a bit, and I know it's gaining a lot of interest for people out there and even here. So asante sana for this opportunity. What am I doing? Okay, so right now,
Yes.
I think I'm just appreciating space and time, and I'm at a place, I'm in transition, let's put it, or let me say I'm taking a rest.
Yes. Good for you.
Yes, so which is such a rare thing when you've gone through the academics, you've been, through work situations that don't give you much rest.
Yes.
So I recently separated. I think that's the crux of it from my where I worked for over 10 years. That was the WHO at the UN.
Isn't it glorious to take a break?
It is so glorious to take a break. I can't believe that you can have such a moment when you are not resting, you're not anxious, you're not worrying about this and that you haven't done, the pending assignments, all that. So I'm really appreciating this moment and thankful to God
Yes.
for being at this place.
Wonderful.
So also taking my time, to reflect, on the things I've done on my life, on my family, thinking about pet subjects that I have or I have had, but I didn't have an opportunity to do them. So reflecting on all that just to see, okay, so where do we start? Which way do we go? Which ones first? Because there are many, and I am hoping I can attain, achieve, and have impact on people and support people, mentor people, empower people with my little life of experience and where I have been and what I have gained over the years.
Wonderful. So you
Yeah.
you you left Kenya, you went to the US, or would we start the most recent wherever you want to start with the UN organization, and so you just go ahead.
Okay. Maybe we can start with the US,
Yes.
the diaspora thing. So years back, I went to the US as a Hubert Humphrey Fellow. So I was invited. There's this program that picks people from around the world. You propose what you're going to do. It's leadership, it's technical skill, but it's a time that also you don't rarely get. I mean, you rarely get that kind of time where
Yes.
you're going to class, you don't have to do exams, but you are reflecting on, I have done so much, which way do I go? And so it's like a middle ground of you've done a lot, you have experienced a lot, but you're trying to figure out how do I go forward.
Yes.
And so I took that. I mean, it was such a blessing to get that moment. And so
Absolutely.
I was based at Boston University, where I went to classes with people much younger than me, with hardly any experience. but just being in class enables one, to reflect on the things they've been doing. And of course, it was around communication.
Yes.
And it's while I was there that I made some decisions, or it gave me time to think through, because before that, I'd been thinking, I need a break. I'd been in the newsroom for at least 15 years. So, you get to a place where you feel like you're repeating yourself. And that's what I felt. Like I was beginning to repeat myself. I need a new challenge. And so I was looking for a new challenge. And so that gave me an opportunity to reflect
Yes,
and
you
to
know, your reason for going to the US for further
Mhm.
studies is so compelling because I was going to ask you, you were
Right.
already a recognized byline. I mean, a
Mhm.
feature editor, you know, really a recognized name in the Kenyan news circles. And then, bam,
Mhm.
you take off, you go to study again. So we're like, okay.
Yes. Yes, I needed that. And in fact, if I was to go back a little, I'd already taken a little break to go and do my masters in Zimbabwe. Again, just that race, the motivation, the what, like I need something. And
Yes,
so
and that
that one
master's
year,
was on a different line, not communication. Was policy management something?
it was policy, yeah. It was
Yes,
it was it was policy, specifically social policy when it
yes,
came to my specific area. But I still brought in communications into it
of
because I
course.
looked at
Yes,
women and gender and how women and men are displayed in the media. So I
yes.
still touched on policy that touches on communications and media.
So when
But
we were preparing for the Beijing
mhm,
World Conference, and
right.
you supported us in training some journalists heading to Beijing, was that
Yes.
after Zimbabwe or before?
That was way before Zimbabwe,
Okay,
but
okay.
it allowed, I mean, that was the other part. I enjoyed my work, and it took me places in the newsroom as a journalist. And that was one of the places that I went, which is a landmark for many people. It's a
Yes,
reference point that I,
yes.
I actually worked with women, for women, along women
Wonderful,
from that far back.
wonderful.
So at that point, I was in the newsroom, but I was also an active member of the Association of Media Women. And
Yes,
later, I became the chair of the Association of Media Women. But it's
yes,
that contribution, it's that, standing up for a cause, I think that made the whole difference for me.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah. So
you're
by
being
the
chair of that association.
Mhm.
That was that. I'm sure the association is still doing well, but those were the earlier ages of that association. It was really impactful
Yes,
as we were all
yes.
heading to Beijing.
That is true. It was one of our most active times. So it
Yes,
had been other members of the association, journalists, women, had started it, and then there was a lull, I think, because of some reasons. But now that it became so critical that it needs to be active, we need to represent the media. Women need to be represented in the media and also among other women.
yes,
And so we're able to actually push it and get some women to go to Beijing, do training. And after that, we were so motivated because now we had all the background of the women's issues, understanding it and being able to pass it around for everybody to understand so that
yes,
they can report without being biased, without noticing and knowing that women are actually biased. So in fact, my research for my master's program on the policy was, like I said, was looking at how are women and men represented. And
yes,
I looked through, several months, just you pick a newspaper and look through it and see, okay, so here is a story, page one story, a picture of beautiful judges or lawyers or something, and then the story is put inside, and when it goes inside, you find it's a political story actually. So the only reason the picture is used on the front page was, to depict women as beauties, as they're
yeah,
judges, they're senior women, they are intellectually very sound,
yeah.
but now we use them as, let's attract
Pretty
more
faces.
readers. Yeah. So you go inside and you find there is actually no story.
Yeah,
That was the story.
yeah,
And so I was able to bring that out and even present it to the editors who at first thought, did you make this up? How is that possible?
yeah.
And but it's how, people are used to doing things without thinking, without critically reflecting on the meaning But that brought it to the
You
fore.
know, changing a culture, changing land, or okay, whatever the behavior is, but changing a certain
Yeah.
pattern of behavior is so difficult. People grow
It
up
is,
with certain
yeah,
way of looking at things that is so
yeah,
difficult. And that is a period when women and some men, of course, and men
mhm,
too, really fought hard to change the thinking
yeah,
about
yeah,
women. I mean,
yeah,
as everything was, it was this avalanche driving towards
yeah, yeah,
Beijing and
yeah,
preparations. And when I say Beijing, I'm talking about the World Conference on Women in
yeah,
Beijing in 1995.
yeah,
So we everybody it was really
mhm,
really great work that that everybody did. It was really
yeah,
a force of nature that was
right,
pushed to
yeah,
change minds for people to
yeah,
think differently from what we have thought, to change the status quo in terms of how where is our head when it comes to thinking of women. Just to emphasize on your point.
right. So it was much help because, as you say, many areas, not just communication or journalism, but it's law, it was agriculture, it was every area where people had a moment to reflect on, wait, what is our status right now? Why are we doing the way we do? The things about women losing land and property, that became a lot of discussion. But it also, as you remember, it became also a threat to the status quo, which was men have it all, women, why are you making so much noise? This is our
Yeah,
culture,
yeah,
patriarchal, this is how we've always lived.
yeah,
So I think that shaking has helped. What we see now, even the whole story about girls performing well,
yes,
it came from that drive. It came from all that conversation. And
yes,
I think for anything to change, there has to be that process, conversation,
yes,
critique, bring out the statistics, all that. So it made the Kenyan society and the world at large
yes,
aware that
yes,
there is some of our traditional practices can be very unfair, were tilted towards supporting men and not the women. So I think it was a good stage, and we have seen other things that have come up.
in fact, a good
Um,
stage to the point
mhm,
that even the issue of fetching water, the hours
mhm,
a woman spends fetching water and bringing it back, and looking
right.
at it not only as fetching water per se, but not
Yeah.
only as labor per se, but a transport factor. You know,
Right.
everybody's eyes got so opened into many areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who would
Yeah.
have thought something that people just thought, oh, she went to fetch water from the river. And that river
Yeah.
may be 3, 4 miles, 5 miles away. And then
Right.
it takes so many hours. And then,
Right.
it was an amazing time. Anyway,
it
please
was,
go
it
ahead.
was a real good time, and bringing it to the fore, so that I think when I think about like the younger generation, they don't know that they are seeing what they see now, but they don't know how big the fight was.
Yes,
And it cuts across environment, it cuts across everything, and also just the thing about finding a voice to speak without thinking, I'm a woman, I can't speak.
yes.
So I
And
think
and
that's
very
one of our.
quickly, while
Yeah,
you're on young people not knowing what had to happen, what the
yeah,
women had to go through to bring some of these things that now look like normal. Like,
hmm.
obviously you have your rights. Were you in Beijing? I forgot. Were you?
I was in Beijing.
You were. Remember how the NGO community were thrown to Wairu? Remember that? I have to
I
mention
was in
that.
I was in Wairo.
Yes, so we were all in that muddy Wairu because we are NGOs.
Yes,
You remember that?
yes, yes. I
So
was
so that's
in I was in
I don't want
Wairo.
to take over with that, but it was a very interesting thing.
It's
Um,
a whole story of itself.
on its own.
Actually, I don't. I think I feel like we haven't paid a lot of attention. I mean, in general,
Yes.
nobody. We hardly talk about Beijing, but it's a landmark moment that I think has thrusted us to where we are. There are
Big
many
time.
criticisms
Big
about it,
time.
but yeah, big time, big
Yes.
time.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So maybe to go back to my diaspora time.
Yes, yes, please.
So I found myself in Boston University, where I'm attending classes, I'm reflecting, I'm meeting other people, and the Hubert Humphrey program is such that it takes you wherever. Who do you where do you want to be attached to? Who do you want to meet? Anyone, it's very prestigious.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so it's while there that I made a decision that I want to catch up with my old interest, which was to go back to school and do a PhD. So it's
Yes.
those reflections that helped me to, shape that direction. And so I come back to Kenya, and then, I mean, I applied, of course, not knowing when I would get. I was just applying actually to say, let me start the process.
Yes.
But, within no time, I got an admission and I got a scholarship. And I'm like, wow, I'm not even ready for this. I was hoping for in another year or two. So a lot had to go in there to make that decision, because when I went for the 1 year, I left my family here, my husband and
That
two
must have been
daughters.
tough.
Yeah, so it was. I always, when I think about it, I think it's the most difficult decision I
Yeah.
ever had to make.
Yeah.
But we had to make it because there was no guarantee that if I didn't go then, that I would get it the following year.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So we sat around the table to figure out what do we do with this. It's a desire. Even if you put it off now, you'll still have it. So.
Yes.
So I took up the challenge, and it was in Binghamton, New York. So I embarked on it and started on this doctoral process, which is one of the most interesting. Or for me, that was one of the most interesting.
I would imagine.
Um, so and then we decided that, okay, so I go with the kids. There were 5 and 12, both very challenging years in terms of, so what do we do with the 5? Of course, she has to go to school. The 12, my biggest worry at the time was all the things that I've seen about youth and young people in the US
Yeah.
and what would happen to my children. uh,
And yet you're
and then
busy. You're a student.
Yes, I'm also a student. So what ended up happening was, and what was reassuring, because I had to visit the university to see, so how exactly will I operate in this space with children before I even came back to Kenya. And what was most gratifying was I found a community of Africans, a community of Kenyans, even with families.
Wonderful.
um, Binghamton University is known for admitting over time Kenyan students who do chemistry, so they've made a big name in
Wonderful.
Binghamton University. Yeah. So a number of them were there with their families. Some of
Yes.
them had children. And so I met all of them just to hear their story, how they're managing going to school, teaching, because you're either a teaching assistant or a research assistant if you've gotten a scholarship. And then how do you manage with the children? So
Yes.
every day you're going to class, but you're also teaching or doing research, assisting, and then you have to take your children from school to take them home, all that.
Yes.
So what was consoling about it was that there were even people with younger kids than mine, but they had a very nice Ubuntu thing, let me just call it,
Yes.
where if I am free in the afternoon, I can go and pick the kids at 3, take
Great.
them to my house and stay with them until you are ready to come and pick them. So it
Great.
was like a roster, like who is
Yes.
free on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I knew that now I knew I could manage. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So yeah, so that's what on that front, that really helped. And we it's like a small community. Every Saturday we are meeting, making chapati and pilau, all that in parties, birthday parties, all that. So
Was
that
that the same
community,
university where Professor Mazrui was teaching also or not?
that's where Professor Mazrui was teaching, and in
Wow.
fact, I worked for him as his research assistant in some 2 3 years. So
Wow.
that was also very supportive. So it was a really supportive community, and we could be with each other. If you needed help, there was always help. And in the
Wonderful.
US, I think that's like such a gift, because in most times, who is taking care of your children when you're going to work, when you're doing whatever. So it's very difficult. So
Wow.
that was one of the most supportive things, environment that helped me to pursue that doctoral process, where I go to class and do all other things that I'm supposed to do. And everybody else did that, and they still, passed their exams and,
Yeah.
marked students' exams because you're teaching as well, and also that you are able to finish.
Great.
Um, I think so. Other than that, the actual process of inquiry, of following the area that you're actually pursuing, is also such a good, interesting thing. I think I was fascinated by the libraries that had so much. I would go to, I think it used to be in third floor, and it was full of African books on
Wow.
Africa. And I'm thinking, they're all here, and hardly anybody looking at them, and Africans are looking for books and trying to understand themselves. How is this possible? But it's such an opportunity where you can read whatever you want to read, you can research on whatever you want to do.
Yes.
I was interested, of course, in something from Africa, from Kenya. So I was looking at African systems, African knowledges.
Yes.
I was looking at transmission of social cultural values or communication of social cultural values, and what that means. So after doing the initial, which was I think the first 2 years, 1.5 years, I had finished my class attendance,
Wow.
and so I could come back home for research, which is what I did midway. I
Yes.
came back to look at, to do research, which I did in Nairobi and Taita Taveta,
Yes.
which is my home county.
Yes.
So I think what's interesting about what brought for me was understanding the African culture, the social cultural processes that we had, the structures that we had, the identity of Africans, and interesting that when you go to the West is when you realize you're more African than when you are at home.
Absolutely.
I
And
don't know if that was your experience.
being out
Yeah.
there makes you so protective of your Africanness. I'm
Right,
sorry, go ahead.
right, right. You really want to represent your continent. And so every example you have in class or whatever you are doing, it becomes very relevant. And the realization that everything the Africans did was fine. They
Yes.
had knowledge, they had practice, they had structures.
Yes.
And my research dwelt a lot on that, looking at what did they do at a certain time. I was looking at the youth transitions, the rites of passage, for instance,
Yes.
and it was very structured and it had results, and they knew when to do it and how to do it. Teamwork, we've been talking a lot about teamwork in organizations and how to work as teams and so on. They already had that long time. So
Yes.
people, even though many of us today did not face or confront or deal with colonialism at that time, it seems to have been passed on.
Yeah.
And so we are kind of passive. Like there are some critical things where people should be confronting and saying, no, this shouldn't go on.
Yeah.
But people are just passive.
Yeah, the
And so
practice,
I
yeah, the practice,
yes,
the mutedness of our
yes,
expressiveness was
yeah,
passed on to
yes,
our to us who really didn't
yeah,
live through colonialism. It's passed on, and we're
yeah,
passing them on to our kids. And I'm glad
yeah,
that there's a certain generation, I would say Gen Z, who seem like they understand they
right,
have to be expressive. They have to
yeah,
think. They have to express what they're
yeah.
thinking. And I think that is a good direction we're heading.
Right. Finally, we are seeing some light.
Yes.
But I was trying to understand what that was about,
Yes.
and it seems the fact that the cultures were disrupted, the social culture was disrupted.
Yes.
People felt alienated, like they can't be who they were, and they can't quite embrace the new thing. So, in fact, the thing that I called it was in betweenness, that we
Yeah.
are all caught in between the past, the colonial, the post-colonial, and the culture that we have adopted, not adapted to. And so we are caught in between, and we can't come through as ourselves.
Yes.
And that's something that we have to learn to. I don't know how we learn, but there has to be ways of learning so that we can express ourselves and defend ourselves and protect what is important to us, including protecting the country, and
Absolutely.
what we stand for. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I wanted to emphasize something you said about
Hmm.
how our culturally we were organized. We worked in
Hmm.
teams. We
Hmm.
understood what is expected of each one of us. I lived
Hmm.
through that example very briefly. There was a time when my dear mother passed on, and there was
Hmm.
this funeral. People have to eat, people have to be organized how they eat. And
Yeah.
one of the people who came to my mother's funeral was a lady who babysat me. I was so excited to see her. And I told her,
Mm-hmm.
oh, Agambo, come, I want to put you here and, serve you. And she said, no, I came with my group. I cannot eat away from them. And I
Okay.
realized that, my God, I've been in America for too long. you know, this lady reminded me that there's a
Yeah.
group to be respected.
Yeah.
You came with a
There's a
group.
structure.
Yes,
Yeah.
whatever special treatment you want to give, you have to give the group. I was
Everybody.
totally humbled. And I just gave that example as, in relation to what you said
Right.
earlier. Yes.
Right. So I think it's we need to find those opportunities that help us to identify what we are dealing with, because if you try to do it superficially, it won't help anyone. But understanding the depth, where we're coming from, why we behave the way we behave, or why we do certain things, it helps us to help society, to change society for the better.
Yes.
So even as when I was doing this research, in fact, in some cases, I found some of the books that were being used for teaching were actually saying we deserved to be colonized.
Yes.
We were not good enough. We needed, colonialism to bring us to where we are, which saddened me. And
Yeah, that's
this is the
unfortunate.
yes, it was in the books, in the primary school books, in the lower primary school
But
books,
that's part
you know.
that's part of brainwashing of us.
Yes, yes, and saying you didn't have a culture, you are nothing before other people
That's
came.
awful.
Yeah, so I'm hoping as we go forward that we have more, and I think we do a little more, but that we rewrite, we revisit our history, which is something that I'm working on right now,
Please
revisiting our
continue.
history and culture so that we can be proud of something. Because one of the other reasons why people don't come out the way they are is that their identity is blurred. They are not so proud of who they are, and that's why they can't speak for
Y-
what they believe in. Because
Yes,
if you believe in something strongly, and if you believe in who you are, then you will defend it. You will defend it because your grandfather and grandfather, meant something with it. And even though we cannot bring the past to the current, but we can learn from those structures and see what is it we can use, so that we can use it for the moment. We can some wisdom from there that
yes,
we can use for the moment. And one of the examples I have, for instance, is in the youth transitions, is a research done earlier and a practice now that has been adapted, is where through the church, that the people have copied or have looked at what was being done, and now they have changed it to bring it into the church to train young people beyond even using the Christian message, but also drawing from those structures to be able to bring more sound minded people who understand what's going on in their community. They are
yes,
more sensitive to it, and what must they do so that they don't fall off the path
yes,
in terms of whether it's Christianity, but also as individuals that are growing up in a society. So we
yes.
have to do a lot more of that.
We do have to do a lot more. In fact, the
Mm.
sense of not feeling adequate, or feeling that whatever is African is not good enough, it still
Yeah.
persists. And
Hmm.
we may take it for granted for those of us who lived out there and realize
Hmm.
how we have to protect our Africanness.
Yeah.
The people who we left back home, some
Yeah.
of them remained victims of that, that way of thinking, that, oh,
Yeah.
whatever is African is not good enough. You want to
Hmm.
hire, for example, a cook, and they think that if they cannot make Western dishes, then they are probably not good enough. And I'm like, no, 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 I want
No.
the opposite, because I've been away for too
Right.
long. I want the African food. And then calabash.
Yes.
I see on some of these catalogs, plastic calabash, and I'm saying, no, 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 you can't have a
Mm.
plastic calabash. You can plant calabash. And so when I came,
Yeah.
I planted hundreds of calabashes. And what I
Yeah.
found out also is calabash
Yeah.
is microwavable without any problem. It's
Can you
organic.
imagine?
Yes.
Can
So
you imagine?
yeah, so there are so many of our own things we have to discover. Somebody said, oh,
Yeah.
most Kenyan vegetables are weeds. No, those are real vegetables. Those are
Yeah.
good vegetables that kept our ancestors healthy. So we have to go
Yeah.
back to eating them. So there are so many
Yeah.
things. Anyway. Please go
There are
ahead.
many things, and now health is even taking us to check on the food that was being eaten before,
Yes,
because we are not even sure what we are eating anymore, or how it's been,
yes,
how it was processed on the farm, what happened, all that, with
yes.
all the fertilizers that we can't even trust.
You know,
Yeah,
many
yeah,
of the things
yeah.
we can't even pronounce their names. We don't know where they came from. So
You
I don't
know?
use fertilizer. By the way, I'm a small scale farmer. I make my own vegetables
Mhm.
and everything, my own honey, everything.
Okay,
But I don't use fertilizer of any kind. I just,
right.
I
You're
mean, I
organic.
find how to depend on the soil itself regenerating
Yeah,
by being
yeah.
encouraged to do so.
Right, and I
Yes.
think there are many ways that we're being advised on avoiding fertilizer, because we have other organic things that we can do, like leaves,
Yeah.
like all that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right.
So then you go through your PhD and yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So I finished that process. I decided I will come back, because that was the promise. That was, I was gonna come back.
Yes.
So we come back. That was how many years? So I did like 6 years of the actual doctoral process. Then I had the 2 years of teaching.
Yes.
So you come back and settle, and usually when you're coming back, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to teach. Most likely, I'm going to teach. I mean, there are various opportunities at that time,
Yes.
uh, and then the opportunity for working for the UN came as well. So
Yes.
I made a decision to take on that one.
Yes.
And one of the greatest things that happened was that, which was my desire, was I wanted to be in an African space, a place that allows me to think African, to have impact, not just for Kenya, but across the continent,
Yes.
where I have information and have access to information about what's happening to the continent. And so one could be in environment, and you have that access to understand, the dynamics, the issues in Africa, better. And so working in public health, enabled me to know about every country,
Yes.
however I wanted it, but
Yes.
also to understand my country, to understand the key issues in health, which is so critical for for everything around a person or around a people.
Yes.
So whether it's emergency response, like what we saw in COVID, or whether it's polio. In fact, when I joined, it had the big thing then was polio. So understanding polio, understanding how you work with communities so they can respond, so that children don't have to get polio,
Yes.
whether it's cholera, whether it's measles, all that, which took me around the country and beyond,
Wow.
to see how people respond, to see how you can support communities, understanding, how communities respond to
Yes.
maybe crisis. How do you work with them? How do you work with partners so that you are able to raise a community to support them, to be healthy?
Wow.
So it's been a real good experience. It's been a decade, actually, more than a decade.
Yes.
And so I'm very thankful that I came back and was able to, trust myself in such a place, and to be able to do the work that I could do, which is around, community engagement, advocacy, communications, media, all that.
That must be so gratifying from New York back home to
Right.
communities. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I redeemed myself. I thought I had lost it.
Good. That's
Because
wonderful.
before then, journalism had also given us, that opportunity where, when you are writing stories about people, you have to visit them on the ground,
Yes.
So whether it's Marsabit or Kajiado or wherever, you
Yes.
needed to understand and appreciate, the background, the issues they were facing.
Yes.
So actually, this last 10 years, I have redeemed myself from, anything else that I had lost. I've gotten
Wonderful.
in touch with the ground, which I really like, communities.
Wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.